I want to take you somewhere, to a specific moment in time.
Okay.
The date is April 20th, 1964. We're inside the Pretoria Supreme Court.
Right.
And you have to picture this. The room is it's heavy, it's hot, it's packed with people, and the tension is something you can actually feel in the air.
Absolutely. And let's be really clear about the stakes here. This is not some minor hearing.
Oh.
This is a capital case. The man standing in the dock is on trial for sabotage, for conspiracy to overthrow the state.
And in apartheid South Africa, for a black man, that means one thing.
It means the gallows. It's a one-way ticket to being hanged. That's what everyone in that room is expecting.
Right. So the prosecutors are there, the police are everywhere, and his own defense team, they're terrified.
Understandably so.
They're essentially pleading with him, listen, don't provoke the judge. Just plead for your life. Ask for mercy. Maybe you'll get a lighter sentence.
It's the logical move, isn't it? It's what anyone would do. When you're facing death, you beg for your life.
But Nelson Mandela doesn't do that.
No.
Instead of a plea, he stands up and he speaks. For 3 hours.
3 hours. Just think about that. Your life is literally hanging in the balance, and you decide to give a 3-hour lecture.
It wasn't even a defense, was it? It was more like a manifesto.
It was a prosecution. He turned the dock, the place where the accused stands, into a podium. He put the entire system of apartheid on trial.
And the end of that speech, I mean, it's become one of the most famous pieces of oratory of the entire century.
It's unforgettable.
I have the quote right here. He looks directly at the judge, Judge Cordes de Wet, and he says, I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities.
He lays out the vision.
It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to see realized. And then he pauses. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
And you can just imagine the silence in that courtroom, the absolute shock.
Right.
That was the moment. The moment Nelson Mandela, the activist, the man the state called a terrorist, the Black Pimpernel, he became something else. He became a global symbol.
He put his life on the line. He pushed all his chips onto the table.
He really did.
And that's what we're going to unpack today. We're doing a massive deep dive into the entire life of Nelson Mandela from 1918 to 2013.
And the goal here is to get past the icon, the image on the T-shirt, the smiling elder statesman.
Everyone knows that Mandela, but we want to understand the man behind it, the troublemaker, the boxer, the sharp lawyer, the guerrilla commander.
And we've got a mountain of sources to draw from. We've been through the Nobel Prize archives, official government biographies, the actual court statements from the Rivonia trial.
And even reports on his later activism, particularly around HIV and AIDS.
Yeah.
So our mission is pretty simple. We want to deconstruct the myth to find the man. Because honestly, the man is far more complex and fascinating than the myth.
The man always is.
So let's go all the way back to the very beginning, because he wasn't born Nelson.
No, not at all. He was born in a very small village called Mvezo in the Transkei region, July 18th, 1918.
And his birth name?
His birth name was Rulilala.
Rulilala. Now, I know that in Xhosa culture, names carry a lot of weight, a lot of meaning. What does that one mean?
Well, the literal translation is something like pulling the branch of a tree.
Oh.
But colloquially, it's a bit of a euphemism. It means troublemaker.
You can't make this stuff up. It's almost, it's like his destiny was written into his name from day one.
It's eerily prophetic, isn't it? The man who had caused the most trouble imaginable for the apartheid state was literally named Troublemaker by his parents.
So where did Nelson come from then? The name the whole world knows.
That came later. When he was about 7, he started primary school in a nearby village called Kwanu. And on his very first day of school, his teacher, a Miss Mindingane, just gave him the name.
She just assigned it to him. Like, here's your desk, here's your book, and by the way, your name is now Nelson.
Pretty much exactly like that. Mandela wrote about it himself. It was just standard practice in the colonial education system of the time. Yeah. The British administrators and teachers either couldn't pronounce the African names or more likely just didn't want to bother. It was easier for them.
So every child just got a new English Christian name.
Yep. It's such a small detail, but it speaks volumes about the power dynamic, Your own identity, the name your parents gave you, is immediately seen as secondary to the convenience of the colonial authority.
A tough way to start your education. But his childhood wasn't only defined by that. He had a very specific, almost aristocratic upbringing, didn't he?
He did. His father was a chief, Gadla Henry Mfakaniswa, and a respected counselor to the Thembu royal house.
But his father died when he was quite young.
Yes. Mandela was around 12, though his memory of the exact age varied a little in his writings. And this family tragedy, paradoxically, is what propelled him into the heart of traditional power.
Oh.
He became the ward of the Thembu regent, Chief Jongintaba Dalingibo. So he moves from his mother's village to the great place at Makekizweni, which was the royal residence.
And this is a crucial part of his development.
It's everything. He wasn't just a boy living there. He was being groomed for high office. He was allowed to sit in on the tribal council meetings.
What would he have learned there, listening in as a boy?
He learned how the regent governed. And in the Xhosa tradition, it wasn't autocratic. The chief didn't just issue commands.
Right.
He would listen. Everyone on the council would have their say. They would argue. They would debate for hours. And the chief would speak last. His job was to synthesize all the arguments and find the consensus.
And you see that in his leadership style decades later.
It's exactly the same method. As president, he'd let his cabinet ministers fight it out, sometimes for a whole day. He'd sit there saying almost nothing. And at the end, he would summarize the decision that had been reached. His democratic style had these deep traditional roots.
He was also absorbing the history of his people.
Yes. In the evenings, he would listen to the elders tell these epic stories of their ancestors, the wars of resistance against the British and the Boer settlers.
So he's growing up this idea that resistance is noble.
Exactly. It's not a criminal act. It's a duty. It's a legacy. This instilled a profound sense of pride and a historical context for the struggle that would define his life.
But eventually he has to leave this traditional world for a more formal Western education.
He does. He goes to Clarkbury Boarding Institute, then Healdtown, which was a Wesleyan college, and finally he enrolls at the University College of Fort Hare.
Which was a big deal at the time.
Fort Hare was the premier institution for Black scholars in all of Southern Africa. It was kind of the Oxford or Harvard for Black Africans. It was where he met his lifelong friend and political partner, Oliver Tambo.
But, true to his name, Roli Lala.
The troublemaker strikes again.
He gets into trouble.
He does. In 1940, he gets elected to the Student Representative Council. The students have a list of grievances about the quality of the food and the limited powers of the student body.
Standard student stuff.
Yeah, but they decide to organize a boycott. And the university principal gives Mandela an ultimatum. Either you publicly renounce the boycott and serve on the council on our terms, or you will be expelled.
And he chose expulsion?
He chose principle over his degree. He refused to compromise, so they kicked him out. He goes home, back to the great place.
And the regent, Chief Jongintaba, must have been furious.
To put it mildly, the regent tells him, you are going back to that university and you will apologize. And then he adds, and by the way, I've also arranged a marriage for you and your cousin Justice.
A classic 1-2 punch.
Yeah. And for Mandela, this was the breaking point. The expulsion was one thing, but being forced into an arranged marriage, he felt completely trapped.
So what does he do?
He runs away. He and Justice flee in 1941. They slip away at night and head for the big city, for Johannesburg.
It's an amazing image. The future president, a fugitive from an arranged marriage.
It's so humanizing, isn't it? He arrives in Johannesburg, this huge, chaotic, industrial city built on gold. It must have been an incredible culture shock after the green rolling hills of the Transkei.
A completely different universe.
A different universe. He gets a job for a short time as a night watchman at a gold mine. And that's his first real, raw exposure to the brutal machinery of industrial capitalism that powered the whole apartheid system.
But the most important thing that happens to him in Johannesburg is a person. He meets Walter Sisulu.
Walter Sisulu is one of the most pivotal figures in the entire story. He's like the master talent scout of the revolution.
What did he do?
He was a real estate agent, but more importantly, he was a deeply committed activist in the African National Congress, the ANC. He meets this tall, proud, charismatic young man with a royal bearing and immediately sees his potential.
He takes Mandela under his wing.
Completely. Sisulu becomes his mentor. He helps him get a job as an articled clerk at a Jewish law firm, Witkin, Sidelsky, and Eidelman.
And this is his entry into the legal world.
Yes. This allows him to continue his studies. He finishes his Bachelor of Arts degree through correspondence, and then he enrolls at the University of the Witwatersrand to study for his law degree.
What was that like for him, being at Wits in the 1940s?
He was often the only Black student in his law classes. He faced racism, both subtle and overt, from some professors and fellow students, but he was determined. He was now entering the professional world.
And in 1943, He takes the big step. He officially joins the ANC.
He does. But he, Sisulu, and Tambo, they weren't very impressed with the organization they found.
Why not? The ANC had been around for decades at that point.
Since 1912, yeah. But by the 1940s, this younger generation felt it had become too polite, too conservative.
An old guard.
Exactly. It was a club of educated gentlemen who believed in writing letters of protest to the British Queen and sending delegations to London. They were petitioning for change.
And Mandela and his friends thought this approach is not working.
Not at all. So they decided to shake things up.
Kind of internal coup.
In a way. In 1944, they formed the ANC Youth League. They call themselves the Young Lions. And their manifesto is explicitly radical.
What did they want?
They rejected the caution and moderation of their elders. They called for a program of mass action, strikes, boycotts, civil disobedience. Their goal was to transform the ANC from this small, elite club into a massive militant movement of millions of ordinary people.
And did they succeed?
They absolutely did. It took a few years, but by 1949, the main body of the ANC officially adopted their program of action. They effectively took over the party's ideology from the inside.
And the timing couldn't have been more critical.
No, because in 1948, the political landscape of South Africa changed dramatically for the worse. The hard-right, Afrikaner-dominated National Party won the whites-only election.
And they came to power on a single promise. Apartheid.
To formalize and brutally enforce racial segregation on every level of society.
So as the laws are getting tougher, Mandela is now fighting back on two fronts. He's an activist in the streets with the ANC.
But he's also fighting in the courts. In 1952, he and Oliver Tambo opened their own law practice.
Mandela and Tambo.
Yes, and we have to stop and appreciate just how significant this was. It was the first and, for a time, the only law firm in the entire country run by Black solicitors.
So for a Black person in Johannesburg in the 50s, what did that office represent?
It was a lifeline. It was the only place to go. Remember, the law was a weapon being used against you every single day. The pass laws, the Group Areas Act, the curfews.
So what was the scene like in their office?
The accounts describe it as just chaotic. The waiting room was overflowing from morning until night. People who had been arrested for not having the right stamp in their passbook, people being evicted from their homes, farm laborers who had been whipped by their employers, total desperation.
And they were the only ones who could help.
They were the only line of defense, and they faced immense prejudice in the courts themselves.
How so?
Magistrates would call them boy or refuse to listen to their arguments. They were often told to sit at separate, smaller tables away from the white lawyers.
And how did Mandela handle that?
He didn't take it lying down. He was known for being aggressive, sharp, and using his deep knowledge of the law to challenge the magistrates, to put them on the back foot. He was using the master's tools to chip away at the master's house.
This all leads up to the Defiance Campaign in 1952.
Yes. The ANC decides it's time to put that new program of action into practice, and they choose Mandela to lead it.
He gets a great title.
He does. National Volunteer-in-Chief.
And his job is to organize this campaign of mass civil disobedience.
Exactly. The plan was to get thousands of volunteers to deliberately and peacefully break apartheid laws. They would walk through Europeans-only entrances at train stations. They would stay out past the curfew. They would burn their passbooks.
The goal being to fill the jails.
To fill them to bursting.
Yeah.
To make the system so clogged and overwhelmed that it would grind to a halt.
Did it work?
In terms of ending apartheid, no. The state just responded with even more repressive laws and arrests.
But for the ANC itself?
It was a monumental success. It electrified the Black population. ANC membership skyrocketed from around 20,000 to over 100,000 in a matter of months. It proved that the masses were ready and willing to fight.
The state, of course, comes down hard on the leadership.
Of course. Mandela is arrested, he's given a suspended sentence, and then he's banned.
We hear that term a lot in the South African context. What did being banned actually mean for his day-to-day life?
It's a particularly cruel form of control. It's not prison, but it's not freedom. A banning order would confine you to a specific area, like Johannesburg.
So you can't travel.
You can't travel. You can't attend any gatherings, which means no meetings, no parties, no funerals. You're not allowed to speak to more than one person at a time other than your family.
Wow.
And you cannot be quoted in any publication. They try to make you a non-person. They try to erase you from public life while you're still living in it. It's psychological torture.
But he kept working, just underground. Which brings us to 1955. And the Congress of the People.
This is a landmark moment. The ANC and its allies White communists, Indian Congress, trade unions, they all come together in a field in Kliptown outside Johannesburg.
And they draft a document.
They draft the Freedom Charter. This becomes the guiding manifesto for the entire anti-apartheid movement.
And its opening line is probably its most famous.
South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white.
To our ears today, that sounds like a fairly reasonable liberal statement.
To the apartheid government, it was pure communism. It was high treason.
They saw it as a declaration of war.
They did, and they responded with overwhelming force. In the early morning of December 5th, 1956, the police swoop in across the country and arrest Mandela and 155 other leaders of the movement.
This is the start of the treason trial.
The Great Treason Trial, and it was an absolute marathon.
It just dragged on and on.
From 1956 all the way to 1961, 5 years of their lives. All the key leaders of the resistance were tied up in court day after day.
Which was the government's goal, presumably, to paralyze the movement.
That was the goal. But it had an unintended consequence. It backfired.
How so?
Because for 5 years, it put all the leaders of all the different anti-apartheid groups in the same room every single day. They had lunch together. They planned strategy during adjournments. It actually forged a much stronger, more unified leadership.
In the middle of all this legal and political turmoil, his personal life is also in upheaval.
Yes. The immense strain of his life, the constant activism, the banning orders, the trial, the lack of money, it completely destroyed his first marriage to Evelyn Mace.
They divorced in 1958.
They do. But in that same period, he meets a young, fiery, incredibly beautiful social worker named Winnie Madikizela.
Winnie, a name that becomes as famous as his own.
Absolutely central to the story. He's completely captivated by her. They marry in 1958, right in the middle of the treason trial.
But they barely have a life together.
They have almost no normal married life. He's on trial, then he's forced underground, and then, of course, he's in prison. For the next 27 years, Winnie becomes the public face of the Mandela name and the struggle, facing incredible persecution herself.
The trial finally ends in 1961, and amazingly, they're all acquitted.
Yes, the state couldn't prove treason, but by then the country had changed. A pivotal event happened in 1960. Sharpeville, March 21st, 1960, a rival liberation group, the Pan-Africanist Congress, or PAC, organized a protest against the hated pass laws in the township of Sharpeville.
And the police responded with lethal force.
They just opened fire on the unarmed crowd. They killed 69 people.
And the autopsies revealed many were shot in the back.
They were fleeing. It was a massacre, plain and simple. It sent shockwaves across the globe.
And the South African government's response
was to double down. Yeah. They declared a state of emergency, and they banned the ANC and the CAC outright. It was now a criminal offense to even be a member of these organizations.
This is the turning point, isn't it? For decades, the ANC's official policy was nonviolence.
Strictly nonviolent. Their president, Chief Albert Luthuli, was a devout Christian and a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
But Mandela looks at the bodies in Sharpeville and comes to a different conclusion.
He does. There's a huge, agonizing debate within the leadership. Mandela's argument is that nonviolence is a tactic, not an unbreakable principle.
And the tactic isn't working.
He argues it's useless when your opponent is willing to use unrestrained force against you. He famously said, "The attacks of the wild beast cannot be averted with only bare hands."
So he decides to form an armed wing.
He convinces a reluctant ANC leadership to sanction it. It would be technically separate from the ANC to give the political wing plausible deniability.
And he calls it Umkhonto we Sizwe, MK.
Which means the spear of the nation.
And Nelson Mandela, the lawyer, becomes commander-in-chief of a guerrilla army.
Yes. This is the phase that the apartheid government and its supporters would always point to. This is the terrorist Mandela.
So what was their strategy? Were they trying to start a civil war?
No, and the initial plan was very specific about this. They adopted a strategy of sabotage.
Targeting infrastructure.
Exactly. They would bomb power stations, railway lines, government offices, things like that. The goal was twofold. First, to scare off foreign investment and cripple the South African economy.
And second,
to show the government that there was a cost to their policies, to force them to the negotiating table. They explicitly tried to avoid any loss of human life in these early attacks.
During this period, the early 60s, Mandela has to go underground. He disappears from public view.
And he becomes a master of disguise. The press nicknames him the Black Pimpernel.
This part of his life reads like a spy thriller.
It really does. He's on the run for 17 months. He disguises himself as a chauffeur, as a laborer in blue overalls. He's living in secret apartments, moving from safe house to safe house.
And he's able to move around because the white authorities are so blinded by their own prejudice.
He used their racism against them. He knew that to a white police officer, he was just another anonymous blackface, a servant. He would drive right past police stations, and they would never look twice at the chauffeur.
He even manages to slip out of the country in 1962.
A huge risk. He went on a secret tour of Africa and even went to London. He met with leaders in Ethiopia, Algeria, and elsewhere seeking support and funding.
And he received military training.
He did. In Ethiopia, he learned how to handle firearms, how to make explosives. He was preparing for war.
But the state's intelligence network was closing in on him.
They were. On August 5, 1962, he was driving from Durban back to Johannesburg. He was disguised as a chauffeur named David Matsumae.
And the police were waiting for him.
They set up a roadblock outside the town of Howick. They knew he was on that road. There have always been persistent rumors that the CIA tipped off the South African police about his location.
We don't know for sure.
We don't know for sure, but they caught him. The Black Pimpernel's run was over.
Initially, though, they didn't have enough to charge him with leading MK.
Correct. They charged him with the lesser crimes of inciting strikes and leaving the country illegally. He conducted his own defense and was sentenced to 5 years in prison.
So he's in his cell, probably thinking, okay, 5 years. I could do 5 years.
But then a catastrophe hits the movement. In July 1963, the police get a tip-off, and they raid a farm called Liliesleaf in the suburb of Rivonia.
This was the secret headquarters.
It was the secret command center for MK. They caught almost the entire high command of the armed struggle in one fell swoop.
And even worse than catching the people.
They found the documents, they found diaries, plans for bomb making, strategy papers, and a clear trail of evidence linking it all directly to Nelson Mandela.
So they drag him out of his prison cell.
And they make him accused number 1 in what becomes known as the Rivonia trial.
Which brings us right back to where we started, to that speech in the Pretoria Supreme Court.
I am prepared to die.
The judge, DeWitt, ultimately decided against the death penalty, partly due to immense international pressure.
Right. He sentenced them to life imprisonment instead.
So on June 12, 1964, they were put on a military plane and flown to Cape Town, and then taken by ferry to Robben Island. Mandela becomes prisoner 466664.
The 466th prisoner to be admitted in the year 1964.
Let's talk about Robben Island. What was it actually like? I think people have a vague idea, but the reality was brutal.
It's a grim, unforgiving place. A wind-swept, rocky island in the cold Atlantic. It had been a leper colony, an insane asylum. It was a place of banishment.
And the prison conditions were designed to break the human spirit.
Absolutely. As a political prisoner, Mandela was classified as D group, the lowest possible category. That meant the fewest privileges.
What did that entail?
He was allowed 1 visitor for 30 minutes once every 6 months, and 1 letter also every 6 months.
And the letters were censored.
Heavily.
Yeah.
Sometimes the warders would cut out so many lines with a razor blade that what arrived was basically just a piece of paper with a few random words left on it.
And the labor was grueling.
They worked in a lime quarry, 8 hours a day, smashing rocks with hammers, digging limestone with picks and shovels.
And the glare from the white lime was blinding.
It was. The dust was alkaline, it got into your eyes, your lungs. It was that lime dust that permanently damaged Mandela's tear ducts. As we mentioned, for the rest of his life, he was physically unable to cry.
That's an unbelievably cruel metaphor.
It is, but they refused to be broken. Instead of a prison, Mandela and the other leaders decided to turn it into a university.
The University of Robben Island, they called it.
Yes. The educated prisoners like Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mburi, they established a whole political education system. They would teach the other prisoners, many of whom were illiterate, how to read and write.
And they studied.
They studied history, economics, political theory. They would write lessons on scraps of toilet paper and pass them from cell to cell. They debated strategy for the future of South Africa. They were planning the next phase of the struggle from inside its toughest prison.
He also made a very strategic decision to learn the language of his jailers. He learned Afrikaans.
He did, and it was a brilliant move. He knew that to defeat your enemy, you must first understand them. He read their books, their poetry. He started speaking to the warders in their own language.
And it changed the dynamic.
It completely disarmed them. They expected a hateful terrorist. Instead, they found a dignified man who treated them with respect and spoke their language. He slowly won them over.
But the years on the island were also marked by deep personal pain.
Immense pain. In 1968, he received a telegram saying his mother had died. A year later, in 1969, another telegram. His eldest son, Thembi, had been killed in a car crash.
And he wasn't allowed to attend either funeral.
No. He begged the prison authorities, but they refused. He had to grieve alone in his tiny 8-by-7-foot cell. He later said the death of his son was the heaviest blow he suffered in prison.
But by the mid-70s, a new generation of activists starts to arrive on the island.
Yes. After the 1976 Soweto uprising, the prison filled up with young, angry students, the Black consciousness generation.
And they didn't necessarily see Mandela as a hero.
Not at first. They saw him and the ANC leaders as old men, out of touch. They were more radical, more confrontational. And Mandela had to win them over. He had to mentor them, channel their raw anger into disciplined political strategy. It was a huge challenge.
By the 1980s, the world outside is starting to change. The Free Nelson Mandela campaign becomes a global movement.
A huge phenomenon. You have the massive 70th birthday tribute concert at Wembley Stadium in 1988, broadcast to 1 billion people. You have songs, protests.
And economic sanctions are finally starting to bite the South African economy.
The apartheid government is feeling the pressure. In 1982, they move Mandela and some of the other leaders off the island to Pollsmoor Prison on the mainland.
Why?
Partly to isolate him from the younger prisoners he was influencing, but also to make it easier to begin secret negotiations.
In 1985, the president, P.W. Botha, makes him an offer.
Yes, a public offer. He says, "We will release you on the condition that you unconditionally renounce violence as a political weapon."
And Mandela's response is a masterclass in political strategy.
It is. He can't speak publicly, of course, so he writes a letter. And his daughter Zinzi reads it to a massive cheering crowd at a rally in Soweto.
What did it say?
The key line was, "What freedom am I being offered while the organization of the people remains banned? Only free men can negotiate. A prisoner cannot enter into contracts."
So he turns it down.
He turns it down flat. He refuses to trade the movement's main leverage, the armed struggle, for his own personal freedom. It was an incredibly powerful statement.
But behind the scenes, he did start talking.
He did. He took a massive personal and political risk. Without telling the ANC leadership in exile at first, he initiated talks with the Minister of Justice, Kobe Coetzee.
And then they move him again.
In 1988, after a bout of tuberculosis, they move him to a house on the grounds of Victor Verster Prison. It was a comfortable house with a cook and a swimming pool, a gilded cage. The government was preparing him and themselves for his eventual release.
The political situation changes again. The hardliner P.W. Botha has a stroke. A new man, F.W. de Klerk, takes over in 1989.
And de Klerk was a pragmatist, not a die-hard ideologue. He could read the writing on the wall.
What did he see?
He saw a collapsing economy due to sanctions. He saw the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, which meant the government can no longer use the communist threat as an excuse for apartheid. He knew the system was bankrupt and unsustainable.
So on February 2nd, 1990, de Klerk stands before a white parliament and delivers a stunning speech.
He unbans the ANC, the PABC, and all other liberation movements, and he announces that Nelson Mandela will be released unconditionally.
And 9 days later, on February 11th, 1990.
The world watches as Nelson Mandela, after 27 years, walks out of Victor Verster Prison.
The images are just seared into history. He's walking, holding Winnie's hand, raising a clenched fist to the cheering crowds.
But there's that wonderful human detail. When he got to the Grand Parade in Cape Town to give his first speech as a free man, he reached into his pocket for his reading glasses and they weren't there.
He'd forgotten.
He had to borrow Winnie's. A tiny moment of vulnerability in the middle of this earth-shaking historical event.
So he's free. But the fight isn't over. In fact, in some ways, the most dangerous part was just beginning.
The period from 1990 to 1994 was not a peaceful victory lap. It was a bloodbath.
The difficult walk to freedom.
Exactly. The formal negotiations, called CODESA, were constantly breaking down, and on the ground, in the townships, a low-level civil war was raging.
Between who?
Mainly between ANC supporters and the Zulu nationalist Inkatha Freedom Party, the IFP, but it was being deliberately fueled by a shadowy third force within the state security services, trying to destabilize the transition.
And the darkest moment of that entire period came in April of 1993.
Chris Hani.
The assassination of Chris Hani.
This was the moment South Africa stared into the abyss. Hani was the leader of the Communist Party and a hero in MK. He was probably the most popular black leader in the country after Mandela, especially among the radical youth.
And he was murdered.
A white supremacist extremist shot him down in the driveway of his home.
And the country was ready to just explode.
The townships were on fire. The youth wanted revenge. They wanted to burn the cities to the ground. It was the closest the country came to all-out racial war.
And this is the moment where Mandela, in a sense, becomes president before he's even elected.
It is. De Klerk, the actual state president, went on TV and gave a speech, and it fell flat. The nation was not listening to him.
So Mandela went on national television.
He took command, and he gave this incredible speech, appealing for calm, but he did it so cleverly. He pointed out that the woman who saw the assassin and called the police was a white Afrikaner.
He used that fact to frame the narrative.
He framed it not as black versus white, but as all South African, black and white, who want peace versus the small minority who want war. It was an act of incredible leadership.
That speech pulled the country back from the brink.
It did, and it put so much pressure on de Klerk that they were forced to finally set a date for the country's first ever democratic election.
April 27, 1994.
The images from that day are just as powerful as his release. The massive, snaking lines of people waiting for hours, sometimes days, to vote for the very first time in their lives.
And Mandela himself, at age 75, cast his first vote.
In Inanda, in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, an incredible moment.
The ANC won a landslide victory with 62% of the vote. And on May 10, 1994, Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as the first democratically elected president of South Africa.
But now the real work begins. He's inherited a deeply divided and unequal country.
And he's got two massive competing problems, right?
On the one hand, you have a terrified white minority who still control the entire economy, the military, and the civil service. On the other, you have impoverished black majority who are desperate for change and have sky-high expectations.
So how does he manage that balancing act? Let's start with the white population.
He pursues a policy of what you could call aggressive reconciliation. He forms a government of national unity, and he keeps his old rival, F.W. de Klerk, on as one of his deputy presidents.
And then comes the 1995 Rugby World Cup.
The event that became the movie Invictus. But the reality was even more profound.
Why was rugby so important?
Because the Springbok rugby team and its green and gold jersey were, for black South Africans, the ultimate symbol of white supremacist apartheid.
It was hated.
Deeply hated. Many in the ANC wanted to scrap the emblem entirely.
But Mandela saw an opportunity.
He saw that if he destroyed their beloved symbol, he would alienate white South Africans forever. So he did the opposite. He embraced it. He met with the team captain, Francois Pienaar. He encouraged black South Africans to support the team.
And then, at the final match,
he walks out onto the field at Ellis Park in Johannesburg wearing a Springbok jersey with Pienaar's number 6 on the back.
And the crowd was almost entirely white Afrikaners.
95% white. And when they saw him, this man they had once feared as a terrorist, wearing their jersey, the stadium just erupted. They started chanting, "Nelson, Nelson." It was a masterstroke of symbolic politics.
But reconciliation couldn't just be symbols. There was the very real, painful history to deal with.
Which is where the Truth and Reconciliation Commission comes in, the TRC.
Led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. This was a really unique approach to post-conflict justice.
It was. Most countries either have Nuremberg-style trials where you prosecute the old regime, or they have a blanket amnesty where everyone just agrees to forget the past.
The TRC was a third way.
A middle path. The philosophy was restorative justice, not retributive justice. The core deal was truth for amnesty.
How did that work?
If you were a perpetrator of human rights abuses during apartheid, a police torturer, a death squad member, or even an ANC guerrilla who killed civilians, if you came before the commission and made a full public confession of your politically motivated crimes, you could be granted amnesty from prosecution.
And the hearings were broadcast on television.
Every day. The nation listened as victims told their stories and perpetrators confessed to horrific crimes. It was incredibly painful, but it was public.
It was very controversial, though. Many victims felt they were being denied justice.
They did, and it was a deeply imperfect process. But the alternative was likely a decades-long cycle of revenge killings and bitterness. The TRC, for all its flaws, allowed the poison to be drawn out of the national wound.
What about the economic side? How did he do on delivering for the black majority?
Through the Reconstruction and Development Program, the RDP. And they had some huge successes. They connected 3 million people to clean water, expanded the electricity grid to poor communities, built new houses and clinics.
But he also faced criticism from the left wing of his own party.
He did. To reassure international markets and prevent capital flight, Mandela's government adopted largely orthodox free market economic policies. He didn't nationalize the mines as the Freedom Charter had called for.
So some felt he sold out the economic revolution.
They felt he secured political freedom, but left the economic structures of apartheid largely intact. That is a debate that is still at the very center of South African politics today.
And he only served one 5-year term.
Which, in the context of African liberation leaders at the time, was almost unheard of. Most stayed in power for life.
But he wanted to set a different precedent.
He was determined to show that the movement was bigger than one man. He stepped down voluntarily in 1999 and handed power over to his successor, Thabo Mbeki.
His retirement, however, was not quiet. He had one last major battle to fight.
And it was a battle against something he later admitted was his biggest failure as president.
AIDS.
Yes. During his presidency in the 90s, the AIDS epidemic was exploding across South Africa. But the government's response was slow and ineffective. Mandela was focused on political reconciliation and was hesitant to lead a public campaign about a disease linked to sex.
He later said it was his greatest regret.
He did. But in his retirement, he dedicated himself to making up for that lost time. He became the world's most high-profile AIDS activist.
He launched the 46664 campaign.
Using his old prison number as a global brand for HIV awareness, he organized massive concerts. He publicly challenged the AIDS denialism of his own successor, Thabo Mbeki.
And then, in 2005, the fight became deeply personal.
His last surviving son, Magatha, died. And at a time when AIDS was still spoken about in whispers, when families hid the cause of death out of shame, Mandela did something extraordinary.
He called a press conference.
He stood before the world's media and said, "My son has died of AIDS." He used his own family's tragedy to try and break the stigma and the silence surrounding the disease in Africa. It was a final, incredibly brave act of leadership.
He gradually faded from public life in his final years, finally retiring from retirement, as he put it. He passed away at his home in Johannesburg on December 5, 2013, at the age of 95.
And the world just stopped. It was a moment of true global mourning.
So after this incredible journey, this 95-year life, when you boil it all down, what is the core of his legacy? What's the main takeaway?
For me, it's his ability to hold contradictions, to contain multitudes.
What do you mean?
He was a Xhosa royalist who believed in traditional ways, and he was a modern constitutional Democrat. He was a man of peace who co-founded a guerrilla army. He was a prisoner who learned the language of his jailers in order to one day negotiate with them.
He wasn't just one thing.
He was never just one thing, and perhaps most importantly, he found a way to channel his righteous anger not into blind revenge, but into disciplined, strategic action. He never let the bitterness consume him.
There's that famous quote of his where he refused to be put on a pedestal. He said, "I am not a saint."
Unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying.
And that's maybe the most useful way to see him, not as some perfect, untouchable icon.
Exactly. Because if he's a superhero, then what he did is impossible for the rest of us. But if he was a flawed human being, a sinner who just kept getting up and trying to do the right thing, then that's a model we can all learn from.
He left the work unfinished, and he knew it. South Africa is still grappling with massive problems of poverty and inequality.
He often said, "It is in your hands now." He saw himself as running one leg of a very long relay race. He did his part. He dismantled the legal scaffolding of racism. But he was clear that the next leg, building a truly just and equitable society, was the responsibility of the generations to come.
So the question he leaves us with isn't, when will the next Mandela appear?
No. The question is, are we ignoring the responsibility that he so explicitly placed in our own hands?
A powerful thought to end on.
It is.
If you found this deep dive into the life of one of history's true giants valuable, and you want to make sure you don't miss our next exploration of the figures who shaped our world, please take a moment to like this audio and subscribe to the History Titans channel.
And maybe share this with someone you know who could use a little bit of inspiration today.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.